Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Polyglot Perspective Podcast, hosted by me, Taylor.
And I'm Lily. In today's episode of Polyglot Perspective Rants, we'll be talking about how you're actually not too busy to learn a language.
And before we get started, we would really appreciate it if you guys could take a few seconds to subscribe to the podcast and our YouTube channel and leave us a great review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. This would truly help us out a lot. And another reminder is that all of these episodes are going to be available on our website at polyglotperspective.com, so please check them out. Thanks.
And to start off with today's topic, you are not too busy to learn a language. A lot of the times, maybe we're learning and sometimes we take breaks or we don't even try learning because of a lot of excuses we come up with.
Exactly. I feel like we've all come up with that excuse with not only languages, but with every single thing we do. Especially a lot of us are high school students or college students, and we have to do it school and work and extracurriculars and everything. And we just tell ourselves that we're too busy to learn a language. We can't do this. It's not something that's feasible because our lives are too busy.
Yeah, exactly. And especially with a lot of students, we got a lot of homework or tests, and maybe we feel overwhelmed with this and think it's impossible to learn another language, or we just don't have the time.
But we're here to tell you that that's definitely not the case. And some examples are, let's say, if you have time to watch your favorite Netflix show once a week, you have time to learn a language once a week as well. And if you have time to, stay on the bus and take a 30-minute commute from your house to your school, then you have that time available to learn languages. So there are definitely times in which you can learn languages. We're not telling you to stay up until 3 a.m. and cram some like French lessons to make the most out of your day, but you have 24 hours in a day, probably spend like 8 hours of that sleeping, maybe 8 hours in school, couple hours for extracurriculars. But at the end of the day, even if you can spend a good 5 to 10 minutes, practicing some flashcards or watching some YouTube videos, you can definitely implement languages into your daily life.
It's kind of like, for example, when you have friends you're talking to, and maybe you're really, really busy with work, extracurriculars, or just things that come up in general. But do you realize how, if you care about someone, you really find the time to interact, to send a message to these people? We can do the same with language learning, and it really goes into actually planning well on how we can integrate language learning into our life around a busy schedule.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And the term, like you said, you have to make time. It's not, I don't have time. Make time. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. And if, you know someone who knows a lot of languages and you're sitting there like, I don't know how they do it. They do this and this and that, but they know this many languages. That could be you. Basically, it's just about the way you incorporate languages into your daily life. Let's say you have time to work out 30 minutes a day. You can also make a habit of spending 30 minutes a day learning a language as well. And keep that consistent. And over time, this will just be something you do rather than being something you think about. It'll just be something that's innate and you do it all the time.
Exactly. And you can even learn languages while you're working out or on your daily commute. But you probably may be asking us, Taylor, Lily, how are we going to learn languages on the bus or in these places? And we would tell you there's a lot of different ways that you can learn languages on the go or in inconvenient places. For example, listening to podcasts in your target language. If you're a beginner, you can listen to beginner podcasts. They have a lot of good dialogues. If you're intermediate, you can just put on an audiobook or just a talk show thing. You can use these times where it's easy to multitask. You can use the time better.
Or just implementing languages into your daily life. You've probably seen it a lot, but you can change your phone's language, your computer's language, YouTube language, Instagram language, pretty much any sort of social media or device that you use a lot. Instead of looking at it in your native language, you can change it to one of your target languages. And that's a good way to sort of enforce the learning, implement it into your daily life. And so you'll basically be in contact with your target language not only when you pick up a textbook or things like that, but also just when you're walking to the grocery store or when you're, like Lily said, just like on a commute or something like that.
Exactly. And you can do mini translation activities when you're just sitting on the bus. So if you've seen signs, and try to translate it into your target language. And if you don't know a word, you can look it up like that. We don't really have to spend hours and hours a day to obtain fluency or to progress with learning languages.
Exactly. And for all of you out there who are trying to make excuses, being like, oh, I don't have a phone, like, what if I don't have, cellular? Well, like Lily said, you can just make up games in your head to use languages in your daily life. Or let's say you're, like I said, like walking to the grocery store or something, like talk to yourself or think about it in your head, write in a
Mhm.
journal. There are so many different ways to implement languages into your daily life. That's the power of languages, it's everywhere. So it's definitely possible to implement languages in your daily life, and it doesn't have to be active. It can also be passive. You can be listening to something, anything to sort of immerse yourself in languages.
Yes. And to sum up this episode of Polyglot Perspective Rants, I'm going to start off with calling you guys out again. You can't say that all 24 hours of your life you are doing something productive, or you are doing something where you can't listen to a podcast, where you can't interact with a language in a certain way. There is always time for that. Stop making excuses of why you can't learn a language when you can. You just have to be a little bit more active about it. Really, just implement some of the tips that we gave you in this podcast episode.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. Again, thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope that you guys sort of learn something from what we said today. And like Lily said, if you want to learn a language, you're going to learn it, you're going to make time for it. So you are not too busy to learn a language. You can do it. We believe in you. And yeah, thanks for listening.